Hello, and welcome to Master Working from Home with Microsoft Teams. My name is Debbie, and I'll be with you for today's session. A few quick notes about today. This session is really designed to give you some tips and best practices for getting started in a work from home environment. So it really is designed for those users who are brand new to working from home. If you are looking for more how-to training, how do I set up a chat? How do I schedule a meeting? Things like that. Please join us for one of our live training sessions at aka.ms/Teams live training. Unfortunately, in the short amount of time we have with you today, we won't be able to show any of that how-to training, but we have lots of resources out there that you can leverage offline. A few housekeeping items about our class today. We are coming to you in a one-way audio stream, which basically means that you can hear me, but I can't hear you. If at any point in time you stop hearing me or your audio cuts out, just try to refresh your browser, hitting F5, sometimes rejoining on a different browser does the trick. The old turn it off, turn it back on usually gets you right back to where you need to be. The best way to reach us today is using that chat bubble. We have folks on the call today helping with some questions, so keep your questions coming, share your feedback, use the chat area to do that. That is our core way that we'll be communicating with you and you communicating with us today. As far as polls, thank you everyone for completing the polls at the start of today's class. We'll be sharing a few more polls at the end. Thank you so much for taking some time to fill those out. It really does give us a good idea of who's in the class with us today and lets us tailor the content just a little bit to meet your needs. No need to raise your hand. We're not using that feature today, so no need to do that. Again, the best way to reach us is in the chat area. We also didn't upload any attachments. I know you see that little paperclip icon. I'm going to give you a different place to access some resources. So if we look at our agenda for today, as I mentioned, this is really about a tips and best practices class. So we're going to give you some tips for setting up your home environment for work. We'll talk about how do you really maintain workflow and productivity while working from home. We'll give you some tips for staying connected to your work group. And if you are a manager or a team lead, we'll leave you with some tips on supporting a remote workforce. Now, everything I'm going through today, I already see questions coming in if you can get a copy of these slides. They don't let us share these PowerPoint slides directly. However, what I did was I took every single bullet point that we're going to go through today, every piece of information, and I put it into an online guide. So that link you see down there at the bottom, aka.ms/Teams work from home tips, Teams WFH tips. You will find all of the bullet points and resources I'm going to cover today are in that online document. So bookmark that. We'll update it over time and you'll always make sure you have the most current information. All right, so we're going to start by setting up your home environment because really the first step in managing an effective workspace is to set up your workspace. So the first thing I invite you to do is designate a specific location. Now, we understand you may not have an empty room in your house that now you can all of a sudden use as an office or, a room you can repurpose as an office, but really look for a space that you can designate that for your working hours, 9 to 5, 8 to 5, that is your virtual office. Could be your kitchen table, could be your coffee table in your living room. Really make it separate from what's going to be happening from a home environment during that time. And then make sense commute to work. I know that sounds a little bit silly, but it does get your brain into work mode. It could be walking out your front door and turning around and coming right back in, right? Take a breath of fresh air and then turn right around and come back in and now you're at work, right? Kind of get your mind into work mode. I also had someone on a prior workshop. I love this. It was so sweet. What he does every morning now, just like as if he was going to a physical office, he gives his wife a kiss goodbye and he says, great, I'll see you for dinner, after work. And then, right? So if you're used to having 2 monitors or a docking station or whatever that looks like in your physical environment, talk to your manager. See what they can do about, you may not get exactly what you had in your physical office environment, but make sure that you have what you need so that you can keep being productive. And if you're used to being in a physical office environment where people are talking back and forth and you hear people walking up and down the hallway, your brain triggers that as some background, just white noise that it gets used to. And interestingly, if it's all of a sudden really quiet, it kind of throws your brain off a little bit. So play some music. Have it just really low in the background. It kind of keeps that white noise going in your own mind. And then make sure you call your internet provider. Absolutely make sure that you have enough bandwidth on your home internet to support your work environment. They can help you run a speed test and tell you exactly what you should expect. So they're really a good source for making sure your internet speed is what you need to be able to get your work done. And then check with your own help desk, your own management team to make sure if you need a VPN or RAS access or other ways to access your network files, you want to make sure that you have all of that taken care of. And then we already talked about limiting that non-work internet use. It could make a big difference. And to the best of your ability, continue your normal work routine. This one is really hard. I've been a work-at-home worker for 15 years, so I've been doing it for a really long time. This was the hardest one for me to adapt to because you know what? Your team doesn't see you anymore. You don't have the visual cues of going to lunch or leaving for the day. And you may find yourself online for 12 or 15 hours a day, right? Because you sit down at your desk and then before you know it, it's dark out and it's 9 o'clock at night. So make sure you're giving yourself those visual cues. You can have a clock sitting in your office or in your kitchen, wherever you're going to be working from. Try to keep your standard working hours. No, dress for the office. Again, the whole point here is to put your mindset in work mode and make sure you take breaks. This is the one that I always forgot to do. I would literally sit at my desk and it would be 8 hours and I would just be working because no one came to knock on my door and say, hey, do you want to go grab a cup of coffee or do you want to take a break for a minute? So plan those breaks, put it on your calendar. Make sure you're taking time to step away, just like you would do in a normal work routine. All right, let's talk about maintaining connection to your work group. Remember, people can no longer just walk down the hall and see your office doors closed or be standing in a group in the hallway, directing your attention to someone in the middle of a conversation. So let's talk about some tips for being able to maintain that workflow. The first thing you want to do is configure your personal settings in Teams. Now, once again, if you're not familiar with where these features are or how to use Teams, make sure you attend some of our training classes, and I'll give you those links at the end of today's class as well. So the first thing you want to do, make sure you have the right headset and webcam. These are now your eyes and ears back to your team. So in Teams, you go to your personal settings and just make a quick test call, make sure that your headset and webcams are working properly, and then set your status message. By default, your team's status, right? The little red and green little buttons next to your picture, that should pull from Outlook, but it doesn't really give a lot of information, right? It's just a red in a meeting, green available. So use the status message that comes with it to customize your message. So maybe you want to say, hey, stepping away to go walk around the block, stepping away to eat some lunch, or heads down on a project. Let people know what's going on about your day because they can't walk down the hall and see you. And chances are, just like a physical office space, there are probably 5 or 10 colleagues that you talk to on a regular basis. So what I different colleagues, and then pin those chats in the chat area in Teams. It kind of keeps them front and center, very top of your list, and then you always have those contacts at your fingertips. The next thing you want to do is allow your colleagues to virtually see you. Remember, they can't physically see you. So let's say you have to go heads down on a project. You have a deadline and you really can't be disturbed. If you were in a physical location, you would just shut your office door. So now what you want to do is put yourself on Do Not Disturb. Embrace that status when you have high priority projects that you're working on. This way, colleagues know that you're not to be disturbed. And then use the status message to kind of further clarify what's happening. And if you're in a group chat, make sure you're using that @mention capability so that someone knows you're directing a question their way. Again, it's kind of like making eye contact with someone and they know you're directing a question to them. Here you want to use @mentions. And then if you're planning on using video, it's a great idea. It does help bring that face-to-face a little bit closer to home, even though you're virtual. If you're concerned about someone seeing dirty dishes in the background or your unmade bed in the background, just use background blur. People can see you, but they can't see what's going on behind you. Quick note about video. Video also takes up a lot of bandwidth. So if you're in a meeting and you're noticing there's a little bit of latency, the first thing you should try to do is just disable your video and see if that helps. And the last tip I want to give here is really being more active in your meetings. So if you're in a physical conference room, it's very easy for people just to talk and kind of see the the physical body movements and your expressions and things like that. But you can't see that when you're remote. So really make an effort to be more present in your meetings, to speak up a little bit, to voice your opinions and concerns or ask questions. Make sure you're using a headset. Don't just use the speakers on your computer, especially if you have other people in your household, right? You want to alleviate as much background noise as possible. And if you are going to use a headset, do make sure to mute yourself when you're not talking. All right? We're all familiar with the heavy breathers, right? Someone who just, you hear them just breathing and they're not saying anything. So make sure you're muting yourself. You don't want to be the heavy breather. All right, let's talk about building community. Working from home can really feel a bit isolating. Actually, a lot of you today on the polling question, when we asked, what are some of your biggest challenges? Some of them said being alone, feeling isolated. Those were some of the common themes that I actually saw today. So let's talk about some creative ways to build rapport with your team that can really help keep the energy and excitement going with your work group. So the first thing, maintain connection as if you were physically next to one another. Let me give you a few examples here. Let's say that every Monday morning, you and your colleagues, three or four of you, went down to the cafe and grabbed a cup of coffee. You just spent 30 minutes catching up. How was your weekend? What did you do? Hey, I saw this great movie, that kind of thing. Catch up over virtual coffee. Every Monday mornings, put a placeholder on everyone's calendar and everyone grabs their own respective coffee or tea or whatever they drink in the morning, and then just meet, have a little good morning chat and talk about your weekend and what movies you saw, what books you're reading. You can just do it over a virtual Teams meeting instead. Super easy. And the next one, have virtual hallway conversations. Right, here's another example. Let's say you're walking down the hallway in your physical office and you run into Mary and you're like, hey, Mary, I haven't seen you in so long. How are the kids? They're getting so big. How was your weekend? Right, just like you would have a hallway conversation if you ran into someone. Do that in Teams. What you want to do, and I challenge everyone on the call to do this at least once a week. Go think about a colleague that you really haven't talked to in a while and go look for them in Teams. And if their status is green, meaning that they're available, send them a quick chat, right? Maybe I look for Mary and say, Mary, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while. How are the kids? You can have that same conversation. You're just doing it over chat instead. And again, it really helps people stay and feel connected. And you know what? We are in a very stressful and kind of anxiety-ridden climate right now. So keep it lighthearted. I love to send memes and Giphies, right? It's happy Monday, happy Friday. If someone's having a bad day, you send them a little meme to cheer them up. It really does help bring down that anxiety level a little bit more, and it just keeps your communications fun. Now, what some of the things that you can do here for a broader work group is establish a remote worker club. Like I said, I know it can feel isolating, but everyone around the world, not even just within your work group or your company, everyone around the world is going through this together. So why not establish a Yammer group or a public team that anybody can join? Or if you want to keep it within your own work group, create a fun water cooler channel within your own team. And then have people just ask questions about remote working, or, hey, does anyone have tips for, getting your dog to stop barking? Or, hey, here's something I did in, working from home today that worked really well. I wanted to share it with everybody. It's just a great way for people to share insights, ask questions, maybe share some challenges. Really, again, creates that sense of community. Now, a few of you on the call said that you're already working from home. So I invite all of you to become champions for your remote worker club, right? You've been through this. You know what those learning curves are. So share your own experiences and expertise. Open the door so people can come to you if they have a question. And then be on point to kind of take lead and monitor that and really help users through that process. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about some tips if you are a team lead or a team manager. Remember that working from home can really be an adjustment for everybody. So building a teamwork environment and community online can really help your users and your team feel supported and really help them maintain productivity. So we're going to talk about some of those tips. The very first one here, this is my favorite tip of the entire presentation. Embrace the distractions. Every day I get asked by people, well, how do you stop the dog from barking? Like, how do you stop your kids from running into your space? Or how do you, and I just stop them. And I said, look, it's not a matter of if those are going to happen. It's a matter of when those are going to happen. Your doorbell is going to ring. And when it does, your dog is going to go nuts. Your kids are going to come running into your office or office space and like, when's dinner? When's lunch? I'm bored. Right. So embrace the distractions where it's no longer about work-life balance where it's one or the other. It's work-life integration. We're all dealing with this together. It is one and the same. I will tell you, my entire team has been a work-at-home team for about 15 years. We all either have dogs, cats, or kids. And inevitably, every single week in one of our team meetings, one of our dogs will start barking or kids will kind of walk into the video and we just bring them along. We're like, oh, you know what? My dog has a lot to say right now. And I shoo him away and then we laugh and we move on. It's not a big deal. And the more you can let people know it's not a big deal, the less anxious they're going to feel. This is one of the biggest fears that people have is they feel like they're not going to look professional if their dog starts barking or their kids come in. Let them know it's okay and really be open to some flex time. They may have to step away to give their kids some lunch or go answer the door. It's not the end of the world. We are all human beings and we're all trying to integrate work and life together. So encourage your team, encourage them to connect with one another, share their stories, and really just support one another. The next thing you want to do as a team lead is make sure that you're building a network. This takes a little bit of effort, especially if you're used to your team kind of being a little bit more informal because you're all used to being in the same workspace. So set up your team for your work group and teams. Right? Set up a team and respective channels allows everyone one workspace where they're filtering all of their conversations, tracking all of their files. It's where you're making announcements, really gives them one solid space to go for information. And then if you're used to your one-on-ones or team meetings being a little bit more informal or ad hoc, I ask you to make them a priority and really schedule them out. Have a formal agenda for your meeting. Make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak up. Because again, sometimes people can feel isolated, right? So you want to give them an opportunity to share their insights and questions and concerns. And if you're planning really long meetings, I had someone the other day who said, hey, would you recommend, we were going to do a team offsite and I'm thinking of just scheduling it as an 8-hour meeting in Teams. And I'm like, oh gosh, like no one is going to pay attention to 8 hours in an online meeting. So we gave her some tips of spreading it out over 3 or 4 days, right? The great news is now you have that flexibility. So spread it out, take breaks in between every 2 hours at a minimum, insert interactivity in your meetings, really do things to keep people engaged. All right, let's talk about a few more tips here. Make sure you're really enabling people to stay productive. So if you have that team and respective channels and teams, post all of important files, applications that you use, resources, really anything you need to do, keep redirecting them back in Teams. It really helps them feel connected and stay connected with their work group. And then encourage people to use channel conversations. So those are just chats that happen within a specific channel. It's very easy to just keep pinging people one-on-one, right? And then you have 30 one-on-one chats going on where you're trying to relay the same information to multiple people. Just do it in a channel conversation. It makes everyone feel like they're part of the team and part of the community instead of having all these disparate conversations. Okay, on the last slide, I said that first tip was my favorite. I think this tip here is one of the most important, and it's establishing communication norms. It is very hard if you are so used to seeing your team in person every single day and being able to walk down the hall and saying, hey, John, do you have that file I need? Now you can't see him. So what you don't want to do, I'm going to first go through what you don't want to do. What you don't want to do is send John a chat in Teams and say, hey, John, do you have that file I need? And then 5 minutes later, go to Outlook and send him an email and say, hey, John, I sent you a chat in Teams looking for that file. And then 10 minutes later, sending Mary a chat and saying, Mary, I'm looking for John. Has he chatted with you today? Trust that your employees are getting their work done. I know you can't physically see them. They are doing their best. We are all doing our best. So set expectations for response times. Maybe give it 2 hours, 4 hours. Let people know when you expect to hear back from them. If Mary's heads down on a project, she may not be able to get back to you right away. But here are two things that you each can do. The first one, as a manager, you can see read receipts. Actually, everyone can see read receipts. So if you send someone a chat, you'll get a little, looks like a little eye, right? And that eye lets you know that they've read your message. Great, read receipt. And what Mary can do is she can like your message. Liking the message is clicking the little thumbs up button. That gives you an indication that she's on it. She's ready, she gets it, and then she'll get back to you. So again, use those visual cues in Teams to know if your messages are getting through, but please don't ping them in 10 different locations before you've given them a chance to respond. And then if you do want to set those types of policies and expectations, use the general channel in your team. I personally like to lock down the general channel for important announcements like that. Set those policies and expectations and give one place for everyone to go to get that information. And then lastly, we've talked about this. I like to bring this up again because I do think it is so important as people start working separately from home. Really do your best to build an inclusive environment. Encourage people to share their questions and feedback in those communities. Do round robins in your team meeting, which is basically going around the table, giving everyone a chance to speak up. Even if it's a matter of how are you, is anything going on today, anything top of mind you want to talk about, and then be mindful and flexible if people do need to step away. Again, we're really trying to integrate work and life, not balance one or the other. All right, so we're going to post a few more polling questions as we start wrapping things up. So I do thank you so much for taking time to give us some feedback there. These are a few other resources. And once again, that link I shared with you at the start of class, I'll rattle it off to you here in just another second, but it points to all these resources as well. So you have one landing place. I invite you to bookmark that page that I talked about earlier. Really does give you one place to go for all of your information. So we're going to get to as many questions, lots of questions today. We're going to do our best to get through all of these. We're running out of time. It's just a quick 30-minute class. If we don't have time to get to your question, all of these resources will really designed to point you in the right direction. So thanks for your understanding there.